We'll be getting started very shortly. And Rob Goulding, our Public Information Manager, are we looking good behind the scenes?
Thank you, Director Spencer. We have about 20 members of the public. Looks like Channel 17 is here. Thank you, Channel 17, as always. And yeah, about 20 members of the public, and we're just about on time. So I think we're going to start when you are.
Okay. Well, thank you all for being here tonight and hauling yourself away from a beautiful evening outside to join us for a conversation about collecting solid waste, recycling, and organics, and how that process happens in Burlington and what options we are exploring for the future. For those joining us on Channel 17 and the YouTube channel, welcome. Thank you for being here. I want to acknowledge our partners. We have Chittenden Solid Waste District and Nancy Plunkett joining us tonight. As our local waste management district, they partner in these and all efforts around managing efficient and sustainable waste management practices here in Chittenden County. I also know We're joined tonight by a number of city councilors, and the City Council's Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee has been very involved in this effort. Thank you to those councilors. And the City Council had passed a resolution in 2018 calling for the city to undertake a study of a potential consolidated collection system. Again, collecting trash, recycling, and organics in the city of Burlington. In Burlington, this administration's focus is on the environment, it's on quality of life and affordability. And those items intersect, those values intersect here with this study tonight. Consolidated collection has been an idea that's been explored in Chittenden County for multiple years. About 8 years ago or so, Chittenden Solid Waste District studied a consolidated collection plan for the entire county. And as you may know, consolidated collection is the predominant form of collection of solid waste and recycling across the country. The subscription service that we have in Chittenden County, in most of Chittenden County, is the exception nationally more than the rule. We're here tonight to explore whether the consolidated collection approach is right for us. And as some folks may recall, Burlington was on the forefront of the recycling efforts back in the 1980s, standing up a municipal collection of recycling. And we were really leading the way in the county back then. The industry has advanced and specialized, and recycling has largely become the norm. That said, how we structure solid waste and recycling, and now with the new mandate for prohibiting organics from landfills, the question of how we collect organics is a very timely conversation. So, under a potential franchise-based system, our consultant here tonight, GBB, has modeled a range of scenarios, and they're going to go over that tonight, that show environmental benefits, cost benefits, and potential quality of life improvements as well. As we know, route optimization may reduce vehicle miles traveled of heavy trucks in our neighborhood streets. It's less noise and wear and tear on our roads. However, such an approach may also limit choice. And these are very important conversations that we need to have as a community. And ultimately, this conversation will inform how we continue to explore consolidated collection or whether we advance it at all. So we're not here to make decisions tonight. We're here to learn and listen. We anticipate that next month in July, we will be coming to the City Council's Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee in late July. And when ready, we will bring forward a suite of recommendations to the City Council, either in late summer or early fall, most likely. We also just want to draw attention to the fact that as of July 1, the state of Vermont will be a new law goes into effect banning food scraps from landfills. And there is much more information on DPW's website, and we'd be happy to answer any questions about that later tonight as well. So I want to thank you again for coming tonight. Our consultant GVB will be presenting, but before we do, we want to do some housekeeping about how you can participate in this call tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to Public Information Manager Rob Goulding. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you, Director Spencer. Thank you, everybody, for being here. As Chapin said, it's great to see you out here on Zoom, and we appreciate your patience. We're trying out relatively new technology given everything going on, so we appreciate your patience, and we want to make this, I think, a good meeting for everybody. So our consultant will be presenting next, and they're going to alert you when we move on to the Q&A portion. So how does that work? First off, you can use the raise your hand feature on Zoom. You look at the bottom of your screen, depending on which view you're on, it's going to be kind of bottom center of your screen. You should see the ability to hit raise your hand. That's going to alert me that you want to speak. It'll be best if you do that when given the indication that it's Q&A time. That's going to happen in order of people pushing that button, so you'll be called on in that order. You'll be unmuted, your name will be called, and then to that end, please make sure your name on Zoom is how you want to be called. You can always change that by clicking the ellipses, the little 3 dots on the upper right of your screen. If you have called in, and I think I might have seen 1 or 2 phone numbers, and want to speak during Q&A, we're going to ask you to press *9. So when it's your turn to speak, your phone number will be called out. So please listen carefully. We'll leave you, and when it's your turn to speak, we're going to leave you unmuted to listen to your answer and to be able to ask a follow-up question. Now, in the interest of being able to get giving everybody a chance to speak, we're then going to move on. But if there's time, we will call on you again if you raise your hand again, especially if you have more questions. If for whatever reason we hit a scenario where we're going really late and there isn't time, we're going to answer any follow-up questions you have offline. We're going to post FAQs on the project page. And as Director Spencer said, we have another meeting next month where we hope there's additional opportunity that you'll take us up on to learn and listen. You'll also notice a Q&A feature that we've left enabled on the screen. For right now, we haven't really used that feature, but we're going to ask that you use that only at this point if you have any trouble hearing something, or if you have any questions about the format that I can answer while the presentation is going on. That'll be a way that maybe you and I can communicate when the presentation's happening to help make it smoother if you're having any issues. So again, we prefer, if you want to ask Q&A, we prefer to use Zoom or to use the *9 feature if you've called in. We've received a number of questions via email. Our consultant will be addressing those in the presentation tonight. If you submitted a question and don't think you got it answered, we encourage you to participate tonight, or just reach back out. And since we're through this first meeting, I'm happy to get you an answer to your question. Thanks as always to Channel 17 for live streaming this on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice there's usually a chat option. That's not monitored for tonight's purposes. So we love that you're joining us on Channel 17 YouTube. If you do want to participate, we encourage you to call in. We encourage you to join us via Zoom. And if anybody has any questions or would prefer we ask your question, you can also email dpwcommunications@burlingtonbt.gov, which I'll be monitoring in real time. And with that, let me say thank you and turn it to Jennifer Porter, Vice President of GBB Solid Waste Management Consultants. And Jennifer, thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you so much, Rob and Chapin. I'm going to move this here to slideshow. Can everybody give me a thumbs up if you can see this? It's good. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. And I know there's a lot of other places you could be, and I appreciate that you find this topic important. And we are so happy to be here presenting to you tonight about our feasibility study for residential solid waste collection contracts. With me tonight is Kate Vasquez, who has been with GBB for a number of years and focuses on collection and public involvement. And she's going to be sharing about the public survey that happened last year when we started this project. And with me also is Sam Lybrand, who's been in the industry for 3.5 decades, having extensive solid waste operations experience. And Sam and I actually came up last year when we started this project together on site and know a lot of the faces in the community conducting our research. So we're so glad to be at this point tonight and sharing. So as was mentioned at the start here, GBB has been the lead on a project that actually started last January, so January 2019. Chittenden Solid Waste District is the fiscal and contract sponsor, but it's on behalf of both the cities of Burlington and South Burlington, looking at the concept of consolidating collection for residential trash, recycling, and food scraps. With us on the project, as well as GBB team that you see here tonight, was C2 Logics, which is a route optimization focused firm that ran the routing scenarios, and as well was Shepard Research, which is a nationally known market research firm that conducted the market research, which Kate will present. So before we dive into what specifically happened during the course of the study, we wanted to lay the foundation for, again, what is consolidated collection? So during the course of the presentation, we will use the term consolidated collection, and there's a number of mechanisms by which that can happen. You can have, as the slide says here at the top, you can contract with one or more haulers to provide service for routes or districts, rather than having multiple haulers as you have now. This can happen through a franchise function or through a contract function. What you see on the screen in green in the middle are the objectives of the RFP that was put out that the GBB team responded to. And I'm going to take a moment to go through these, because I think it's important as we lay the groundwork for starting. How did we get here? And this topic has been discussed in the previously in the region, but in this case, it was driven by both cities. And you can see on the left side of the green box, the goal of the thought with the possible consolidated collection would be the increase of recycling, increased diversion, especially with regard to food scraps, knowing what was coming with the new law, use of wheeled carts for recycling, safety on the roads, and also compliance with state and local mandates. Then on the right side, you can see the thought was that we would see decreased cost to residents and haulers through more efficient routes, reduced environmental costs because of the excess truck traffic, and infrastructure impacts, as Chapin mentioned, with road wear and tear. Also, the improved decrease in litter from the use of the wheeled carts, and as well as noise. And as was mentioned, a number of comments have come in from the public in advance of this meeting. And I would say in review of them, a number of the comments in favor really did touch on a lot of these, both quality of life and also climate change and other environmental issues, noise. I saw a lot of this reiterated, which was good. Just to put this into context, in terms of what we are seeing, GBB is a national solid waste management consulting firm. We're based out of Virginia, but we work across the country and internationally. And so we wanted to give a context here to, what are other households in the United States seeing in terms of curbside? So on the left pie chart, you can see that in terms of access to curbside recycling, the predominance, 3/4 of households have access to curbside recycling in the US. And if you look on the right side, in terms of the source, in terms of how is that service provided, this is the statistic that Chapin referenced at the start, that 81% of that service is provided through municipality or private haulers under contract, versus 19% of that service being provided as Burlington and South Burlington have now through individual subscription service. This is from 2015 data, and the next slide gives you a sense of this same sort of over time. This is from GBB's own benchmarking of nearly more than 450 cities, showing that residential curbside collection increasing the number, moving from 81 to 83%, now being provided through the municipality or haulers under contract, and shrinking percentage in terms of those being provided through subscription service. Kate?
Thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to talk a little bit about the survey that was conducted. These questions were about the project itself that we're talking about tonight. Some of you may be familiar with the biennial survey that the Solid Waste District does. Though that was also conducted, but these are the completed surveys of these questions about the project. So they're separate operations, and we're only going to discuss the results of the questions and the survey that was administered about the topics we're discussing tonight. So I think it's a little small because we came out of presentation mode. I'm just going to pause for a second.
Okay, hang on one second.
I think I could just let you advance the slides,
Yeah,
Jennifer.
I will.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So this just shows you that the number of completed surveys, this is a number that provides statistical validity using appropriate weighting of the data to match the population and to comply with the characteristics of the population to make these responses predictive, so that it is with 95% confidence you can state that this is representative of what other people like these folks would have answered if they had answered the survey. That's a big shorthand of how statistical sampling works, but this is a statistically significant scientific survey. And you can see that about almost 2/3 of the respondents were from Burlington and a little over 1/3 were from South Burlington. So we can go on and look at some of the results. Some key observations here. It was estimated that about 3/4 of the people who answered said they are subscribing for a curbside collection service. And the others may be self-hauling, probably. One of the assumptions in the models we have about if there was consolidated service is that a little bit more people than that would go ahead and get curbside service if it was, easier. They didn't have to shop around or something like that. So that would be projected a little higher, as Jennifer's going to talk about. Bulky waste, this is, furniture and appliances that you set out at the curb. Very few people indicated that they have ever used any curbside service or that they even very frequently have bulky items to dispose of. Presently, as many of you are probably familiar, when you have one of those items to dispose of, you're probably buying a new one at the same time, and whoever brings you the new one takes away the old one. Of course, there's exceptions, but that's now very, very, very common, and many people say that they've never used bulky waste. Food waste, we saw in the survey, and we've heard in the feedback also tonight, is that it's a lot of positive response to the idea of being able to separate food waste for composting and having that something that would be done through collection. It was mentioned at the top of the meeting about a new law about food scraps going into effect in your state. So there was a positive response to the idea of adding that as a service or incorporating that as part of the new service. Yard waste, there was a relatively low level of interest and participation in yard waste collection at the curb as a waste stream. Many of the respondents indicated that they are managing their yard waste on their site, on their property, or they have a service and the service takes away the material when they complete their work. I just want to add that when we say managed on site or managed on property, that could mean that they use a mulching mower and they let the grass lie when they cut the grass, or that they do something with the leaves, mulch them into the yard, something like that, that there's basically nothing that they bag up or pick up. And then some people also indicated a few that they are self-hauling it somewhere to be processed. But for the most part, this isn't a material that a lot of residents indicated that they currently do or are interested in setting out at the curb as a separate waste stream. And then costs, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in the following slides. The costs that people answered when we asked how much do you pay a month for your trash service if you have curbside trash service were consistent with communities in the U.S. that have very high cost of living. For example, the DC area where GBB is, it was consistent with those kind of costs, much higher than, for example, in the Midwest. This is partly a function of per ton disposal costs, which are high, but it's also a function of organizational inefficiency, not at the fault of any individual company, but just the routing and the issues that have been discussed already. They cost money, and so they increase the operational costs of the waste collection service. So I said we were going to talk about cost a little bit here. Now, when we asked people and they were asked to give a dollar amount, their responses were grouped into ranges. And in Burlington, there was no clear consensus. You can see each of these sort of squares here are not that different from one another in size. They are proportional in the number of responses. So there's no one clear consensus on how much it costs. The most common value only had 5% of the responses. The most common response given, besides I don't know or a refusal to answer, was actually quote unquote nothing, which is probably a perception of the person answering the question. Either they don't know, or maybe it's included if they're a renter. But there's basically, the main thing that we learned from this question is that these prices are expensive in the U.S. waste collection market. This is kind of top dollar. It was kind of similar, and I was just going to say it's kind of similar in South Burlington. Not a huge, no clear consensus on how much it costs. And this also reflects the fact that garbage collection is not a commodity; it's a service, and so the pricing is subject to market forces other than simply operating costs. It's also what the market will bear, what the customer can or will pay. So, of course, there were several questions about interest or opposition to having a franchise system. That, of course, being where there's some sort of procurement, and operators are assigned an area where they can operate. And there was a brief explanation given to the people answering the question, and there was a good amount of support from people as they understood. You can see almost 40% in Burlington and half in South Burlington. However, the orange pie wedge there was I don't know. And the light green is I don't have enough information to answer that question based on just the short description that was given to them in the survey. And you can see that is the second, those two, excuse me, I don't know or I can't say, are the next most popular response. So this is why we have these public meetings, to have ongoing public participation, to get more information to the people in the communities and neighborhoods, so that we can get ongoing feedback and understand better the attitudes and interest in these possibilities. So having had it explained about franchising, the question was asked, how would you like to be billed if there was franchising? And part of the reason that this is very important is because of how the cost of the billing would be borne, and how it could be who would literally pay the bill. For example, if it's on the taxes and there's a rental situation or there's a different owner, it can be complicated. So we wanted to just see what people thought about it, and also judge their interest in the size of the role of each of the parties in the operation. So you can see that the most popular answer was in Burlington was I don't know. And then the most popular answer in South Burlington was billed directly by the hauler, where you would still have all the billing would be with the haulers. It's just that they would only be in their franchise area or areas. A little bit of interest in having it on a utility bill, and a little bit of interest in having it on the tax bill. So kind of split around, but the biggest was people want to have some more information, or a lot of people like the relationship they have with their hauler. So maybe that's a reflection.
Thank you, Kate.
Yep.
Okay, so we now are going to move into the consolidated collection information in terms of what we studied. And I wanted to say that what we included in the contracts for this assessment was buildings with 1 to 4 units, so not multifamily complexes. We also had as a benchmark the concept of performance standards for haulers under the contract or in the franchise, meaning that you would have to meet as a hauler performance standards, and there could be penalties up to and including losing the contract if those were not met. Also, we know from the comments leading up to this and prior, the importance of backdoor service. We know this is as in most communities, a customized service that would still need to be offered. And we're presuming here as a backdrop, this would be for an additional fee. Okay. Okay, so the other important part here is that there needs to be opportunities for small haulers to stay operating in the district. So that was an important baseline. The middle option here in terms of opting out, this is an item we definitely heard is important in the survey that Kate discussed, and also in the comments coming in, that it's important to allow for residents to still be able to opt out of the service or self-haul to a drop-off center. Okay, and then the last point here is that the current monthly price range shown for residents is varied, as Kate said, and what we pulled this from the companies operating. You can see a range from $28 to $49 for weekly trash and recycling, and a range of $37 to $45 for weekly trash every other week recycling. So it's important to keep these in mind as where we're starting from in this process. Now, we didn't have exact hauler records for the number of customers at which price point, but we did have sort of consolidated information about their service levels and the range of the cost. So these numbers do line up with what came in the public survey. So on this slide, it shows what we looked at in terms of the options for consolidated collection. And you can see that we projected, again, using our C2 Logics, our routing firm, and then our operations experience, projected different scenarios. So I'm going to look at the top line here. If you look at the base case in a consolidated system, we looked at weekly trash, every other week recycling, no food waste, not allowing any opt-outs. In each of the scenarios, we looked at both spreading the cost over all the residents, all the customers in Burlington, that's 13,000 customers. If you allowed opt-outs, we then projected it down to 11,000 customers. So as you'd expect, if you have less customers, the price per month per resident goes up. So in the base case, you can see the price for Burlington is about $23 a month in that scenario. If you did allow, if you did allow the opt-outs and shrink the number of customers, we're projecting at $24 a month. We have a lot of information in the report, which is up on the website with all the assumptions going into these scenarios. But I wanted to say at a high level that essentially we looked at these different scenarios you can see here for both each service level with opt-outs and without. And the numbers you see in red, which is option C, is our highest price, which is a weekly trash, weekly recycling, weekly food waste, allowing the opt-outs at 50% and getting to about $35 a month projected per resident. Again, still at or below the current range of what's paid for residents. The lowest cost option then is the next line there in green, option B. We looked at every other week for both trash and recycling and not having food waste, also not allowing opt-outs, meaning everybody's in, and we get to $20 a month. So just that sort of the range, and you can see the different configurations then in the options presented. But at the box on the bottom, I wanted to highlight that we did want to incorporate there are a lot of scenarios that could be fit together here, but essentially we wanted to show the option of electing for the service, recognizing that there's a significant population that does do the drop off. We wanted to look at the choice of adding organics. We did assume the choice of additional service price for the backdoor service, and also choosing container sizes. So there's a mandate at the state level regarding container sizes, but if the cities, and again at this point we're in the public sharing process. If this went then with all the information from this to City Council, they want to move forward, there would be a lot of details to work out. But what we wanted to share here was showing you the range and a lot of the thinking that went into bringing us to this point. It was mentioned at the start that there have been previous looks at this, and one of the pieces of information that I know was shared and that we replicated was to kind of show the entire system savings. So what I just shared was, you could see cost savings per month per resident. You know how much you pay. You could look on the chart that I just shared and could sort of compare. But for the system, this slide really looks at if there was consolidated collection, and we looked at, this is using the every other week solid waste and recycling. If all customers had that service level, there could be a savings of $700,000 to $2.8 million in the system for the city of Burlington. And you see, we look comparing this to what we're seeing nationally, and also remembering there's additional benefits that I'm going to touch on briefly in a moment that are, the environmental benefits and other quality of life benefits that don't get captured in the dollar value, but the dollar value is there. This slide then shows if you looked at, again, the weekly solid waste and recycling. So the previous slide was every other week. So the lower cost option, this is weekly solid waste and recycling. And you can see we're getting to 1.5 to 3.5 million in savings projected for the city of Burlington, and still getting the additional benefits on top of that. Okay, and in terms of greenhouse gas impact, this is definitely a point that I mentioned was part of the original RFP and has been echoed in both the public survey and the comments that have come forth. So we wanted to look at this piece in particular. So what we are estimating, we can see presented on the slide here, is that there are 3 haulers that currently serve 75% of the city's customers, and none of them have greater than 50% of the customer base. So essentially, what that indicates is that all 3 haulers are covering nearly all the miles in the city for those customers. So that if we in any district, small district, had then assigned 1 hauler, that we're estimating that the collection system could save up to 2/3 of the current miles traveled in greenhouse gas emissions. And so on the left here, then you see that in the scenarios that we presented, we estimate the number of trucks in the fleet needed for Burlington for both weekly and every other week. This is for waste and recycling, the number of trucks needed, and you can see the greenhouse gas implications are significant and directly tied to the vehicle miles traveled reduction. With that, I'm going to turn it to Sam Labrand, who's going to wrap us up with our recommendations.
Good evening, everyone. We have several recommendations as part of our study. The first recommendation would be that the City of Burlington or the district negotiate a disposal agreement directly with Casella Waste, which operates the only solid waste transfer station within the district. This transfer station delivers the waste that it receives directly to Casella Waste's landfill in Coventry, Vermont. This means that Casella Waste has the only integrated waste disposal system in the district at this point in time, and it could provide them with a competitive advantage to the other haulers that would be competing for an RFP. So we'd recommend that the city negotiate an agreement directly with Casella Waste for disposal. This will help provide a more competitive situation for the RFP in our estimation. And keep in mind the disposal charge, which is component, I will say, normally about 35% of the subscription fee is currently rolled into that subscription fee. So you can see the impact it could have if you can negotiate a disposal agreement directly with Casella Waste. It would also prevent some markup of the disposal by the different haulers as they submit proposals. We also recommend that the City of Burlington be billed directly by the district for the processing of recyclables. What you would be requesting the haulers to do is submit a proposal for a 7-year initial term of the agreement with 1 3-year option. They would have to project and forecast the fluctuations in the price of commodities recovered from the recyclables over a course of 7 to 10 years. And that's very difficult to do. So right now, the district adjusts their fee based on the price of the recyclables that are recovered and the market prices on a periodic basis. So we really think that would also take some of the variation and encourage participation by haulers in the RFP process. Next recommendation is we do recommend that you have a maximum service opt-out of 15%. The basis for this is the haulers will need some basis for preparing and submitting their proposals and their pricing. If they bid on the contract for the city of Burlington, but 50% of the city is not or have the ability to opt out, you won't see any sort of favorable pricing as far as from the RFP process, most likely. So you would have to cap it at about 15%. Would definitely recommend that the city of Burlington and whatever the city of South Burlington decides, that you issue separate RFPs. This provides you with your own individual choice as a city as to how you would want to proceed. We recommend that the RFP consist of a 7-year initial term with 1 3-year option period based on the city's discretion. The basis for this recommendation is that the haulers will have the ability to achieve the correct return on investment on purchasing and acquiring equipment, trucks, essentially. And they'll be able to spread that cost over the initial term of the contract of 7 years, not just put it on a shorter term contract, which would raise your potential rates that you would be charged. Then we recommend that the district expand their food waste capability if you decide to include food waste collection as part of the contract. At this point in time, to the best of our knowledge, the district operates the only food waste and composting facility in the district. So, and I believe based on our last visit, the district was almost at capacity for accepting food waste. So that's an option. That is a recommendation that we would consider. We would like to put forth. And last, we'd like to recommend that you include several different options, such as backdoor service, on-call in the RFP that can be, for additional cost that the residents may utilize. This provides you with several different options for your residents and provides the residents with the option of choice. Those are our 8 basic recommendations. I went through one I missed. I apologize. We do recommend that the city consider billing the residents directly through utility system. There's 2 reasons for this. The haulers would have to take into account an accounts receivable risk, which would probably raise the pricing of their proposal. And currently, the city of Burlington charges its residents a $4.20 a month solid waste fee. That fee is charged currently by the hauler to the resident, and then the hauler reimburses the city for that fee. And it's a somewhat complicated administrative matter. So that was the last recommendation we had. So the total of 8 basic recommendations. That's pretty much it, Jennifer.
Thank you, Sam. We're really at the end here. I wanted to just again give a little context to the process that we're in to again remind everybody where we are. So we are in the gray bars at the top in terms of completing the feasibility study and then presenting to City Council the results of this meeting and the future meeting that was mentioned in July, and the public comment will be part of that package that comes to Council, maybe some changes to then the report. And what you see here in terms of implementation would be if there's a choice to go forward, we're projecting about a 12-month process to make that happen following if there's a decision to move ahead. So just to give a sense of where this would be in timeline. And with that, we're at the end. And I think, thank you to everybody for listening. And we are going to open it now up for questions. And I believe I'm going to stop sharing, and then we can come back to any slides if we need to.
Jennifer, thank you. And thanks for everybody again for joining us. I did see some people join a little after we began. So just want to share some instructions for the folks who didn't hear the initial kind of preamble on how to raise questions or answers, or ask any questions or share any comments. We did get a Q&A question if we were going to have public comment, and I think this Q&A period should certainly, you should feel free to let this period serve as that if you want to make a statement about this project in addition to or in place of asking a question. So just to reiterate, if you're on Zoom, we encourage you to raise your hand. That should be at the bottom of your screen. You press on that, that will alert me that you're ready to speak, and we'll call on you when it's your turn. If you're on the phone, we'd like you to dial *9. And for those joining on YouTube, Channel 17's YouTube, to comment or ask questions here, we do need you on Zoom or by calling in. So we'd encourage you to do that. The YouTube comment box is not monitored. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can facilitate some Q&A. First up is Gene Bergman. Gene, thank you for joining us. I'm unmuting you right now.
Thank you, Rob. I have 3 questions and several comments. Let me start with the questions, and you get them, and then let me go through the comments, and then you can answer the questions. The first question is why you did not investigate a municipal system instead of a contracted out system. And I look at the 81% of the country that has, at least by your records, that system or something close to that. So I want to know why that was not investigated. The information and footnotes numbers 1 and 2, which I believe are on page 2. I'd like to know where the information that backs up those conclusions are, and I would like to see that information made public. And in particular on that, I believe that we should understand who saves what, and breaking that down, the city of Burlington, the customers, if there's anybody else that's saving that spread of, I don't know, 700,000 or 800,000 to $1 million, 2 million, whatever that was. I don't have it right in front of me, but those breakdowns should happen. The last question relates to your survey, and I'm wondering whether there was weighting of the survey to take into account the fact that 60% of Burlington residents rent. So the survey has 41% of the people being apartment owners and condos, which is very different. And I'm not sure how many of the single family home owners you had were renters. But when you start to look at your numbers, I think that you would find that the support for consolidation may be understated in your survey, which now brings me to my comments. The first is, I think, I just want to reiterate that question, that comment about the survey. So I really think you should be looking at that in light of the fact that it seems that renters would particularly be more supportive, in particular because they're not necessarily as long-term as single-family home owners, and yet the opposition to consolidation is much stronger with homeowners. So I think that your demographics may need looking at if you haven't already done that. I personally strongly support consolidation, and I agree with the values of environmental stewardship and affordability. But what I think is missing is economic justice. And I believe that this report advocates privatization of Burlington's recycling system, which I strongly disagree with. And I believe that it exacerbates inequality. So I'm disappointed very disappointed that a municipal system was not an explored option, particularly if 81% of the United States with curbside recycling is served by the municipality. We deserve to have this option on the table, and therefore, I ask you to do more study on this and not to rush this through to the council. And I would note that that's consistent with your gray box. It looks like there was some analysis of a municipal system, if I'm reading the footnotes correctly. But what we really need to know is what a municipal system would buy us. And I don't personally, and I'm getting to the end of my comments, don't see why it would not save the city and be better. A public system means that the people that were hired are going to be hired for union jobs at decent wages and benefits. The overall savings goes to the fee payers and the city, and that goes to the public and not to the private owners and the company's profits. I would note that Casella's the CEO makes a gazillion dollars. And so all of the same basic recommendations that you have there, those 8, seem to be still valid, except for number 3 under a municipal option. But that could be modified to create a fee system options for a municipal system. So I really don't think that is a big deal in terms of the recommendations. Finally, I do support there being for I would call the options, like for the small haulers, like the on-call or the backdoor. I think that those are ones that are very appropriate for smaller haulers or for haulers to do. And I also agree that there should be an opt-in, whether the 15% limit is right. I know I personally don't use a hauler. I bring my own stuff and I recycle and under the city system, and I compost virtually everything except my bones and the fat. So thank you very much. In sum, I want you to go back to the drawing board to investigate a municipal system, which I think is absolutely necessary for the people to make a valid decision on this. Thanks. You can mute me, Rob.
Thank you, Gene.
Okay. Rob, do you want me, thank you so much, Gene. Do you want me to, in terms of the department response on the municipal system, do you want to hit that one first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll hit that. And Gene pretty much laid it out as it is really. CSWD started 5 or 6 years ago exploring consolidated collection, and when the city of South Burlington decided to consider consolidated collection, they kind of picked up where Chittenden Solid Waste District left off. And in 2018, with the Transportation, Energy, and Utilities Committee, advanced a resolution to the full council. It didn't explicitly say, a municipal run system, but more of, I would say, a traditional consolidated collection, which is, a private contractor contracted by a municipality. But absolutely, we can take a look at this. This is why we're having this meeting, to explore a municipally operated system, and determine what additional information we need beyond the existing study, and work with GBB to develop an additional scope of work along with a cost estimate, and we can bring that back to the committee and council.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. And then I would say then, Gene, to your second question on the footnotes, and thank you for being so diligent on reading and following through the document. On the footnotes, you noted footnote 1 and 2 in terms of who saves what. I would just say that we do have an expansion of that was the reference in the executive summary. There's an expansion on page 46 of that methodology in terms of how we got to those system costs. And you're right, it is not any it's the entirety of the cost, but essentially, for example, in the lowest cost option, as we presented the every other week scenario, we got to about $20 a month, and we compared that to the average of the current range for that same service, and that's how we got to the cost savings. So you're right; it doesn't. There's the resident portion, but it's we framed it as entire system cost. But as it currently is, it's compared to what the average resident pays currently for that service and what we projected that it would be. And then the higher numbers are for the higher level of service. But again, that is expanded on page 46. And then in terms of the survey question, I am going to pass that to Kate. And I know we do have, we did address that in the study.
Thanks, Jennifer. I know I can tell, sir, that you've seen the report and the responses that were given. We had we had ownership at more like 60%, but I know the census data says 40%. So I'm trying to resolve that. I'm going back and looking at the way it was explained by the survey company. I'll answer your question. I know you've read this, but I'll answer it for anyone who hasn't maybe looked at it recently. And then also, I am happy to talk about this with you more and how they made sure that all those data were weighted appropriately when there was an available strata to do so, to the as much extent as you would like. I will let everyone know that for the Burlington samples, the research firm weighted the results by education and type of household and said it wasn't necessary to apply a weight to this data on rent or owning, number of residents, or the gender, because these attributes already had a factor of 1, which means that applying further weight would not change the outcome of the that is already representative. So that is the answer I can give you now, and I would be very happy that we could talk about it more, either by correspondence or telephone, and I can bring in the research firm also to answer that to your satisfaction.
Okay. I think we hit Jean's questions. Jean, I hope that's accurate, and I'd encourage you to raise your hand again if you need to, if we have that time. If we don't have that time, as we've said, we're going to find a way to answer any questions that do arise as the day goes on. I'm going to move on to the next person and ask Bonnie Borden. I hope I'm saying your name correctly. I'm going to allow you to talk, and we're eager to hear your question or comment. Bonnie, if you're with us, you are free to comment. I believe you should be all set up. You were just muted, I think, by mistake as you began to speak. So sorry about that, and encourage you to try one more time.
Hello.
There you are, Bonnie. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am a new resident of Burlington and owner in what we call an association community. And I hope this study can reflect on that population of people. We're not all just renters. A lot of us own. And our boards, which I'm a member of, contract with the hauler for recycling and trash currently. That rate jumped in January, I guess because of the cost to the hauler. And so I don't know how, we asked the hauler, when we start taking food scraps out of the trash, will the price go down? And they said no. So that is kind of thinking about cost concerns there. With the new law, July 1, the board here at Ledgewood East has asked that each owner and be responsible for how he or she handles their food scraps. And we gave them the Chittenden solid waste information. I think a good percent are going to contract privately with 3 of the folks out there. My cost weekly to do that will be $32. Now, I've thought about trucking off my scraps to Green Mountain. Is that what it's called, Green Mountain Compost? But then I figured, well, that's a 20-mile round trip, and what happens when winter comes? Because we're also an association community, I would like your committee to think about a solution is not to have a community-wide slop bucket or collection base, because that just would not go over well. Just because of the odor, bacteria, critters, that kind of thing, and the cost to maintain it, build it, etc. So that's one of my concerns. And also, do we know when the Burlington Chittenden Solid Waste will be able to reopen for recycling again and for any food scraps? And that's all I have. Excuse me.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll leave you on for a moment, and our folks will answer those questions to the best of their ability.
Bonnie, I'll start with the drop-off center. I've been talking with Chittenden Solid Waste District, and they are not planning on opening that yet. We're in discussions about it. They're trying to do it safely to limit interaction with people. It is a constricted site, but there is talks going on about it. And, when more information comes out, we'll post it on our website.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And in terms of what we looked at, as I mentioned, the households that we looked at were 1 to 4 unit. I'm assuming this is the community is larger, and I would say that it wasn't explicitly then covered in the study, and in that way, because we really did from the beginning start it with the limitation of 1 to 4 units. But I think that in terms of some of the recommendations that we're making around infrastructure and improving food waste processing infrastructure, and also we are aware of a lot of the additional market players who are focusing just on food waste, and I think there is going to be more options available, although it is not in the scope of what we did study here. But again, we're taking comment, and some of the comments about the municipal system also we're taking into account. So Sam, I don't know if you want to chime in anything else operationally related to this question of the associations, or if there's nothing, you have something out there. And I think you might be on mute, Sam, if you...
No, I just unmuted.
Okay, there you go.
My only comment would be I'm going to assume that the association contracts directly for all of its residents with a waste hauler for services.
That is correct. I believe it's Casella.
Okay.
And that would be regular trash and then the recyclables.
Okay. That makes sense, and it's common practice. You could consider, the city could consider trying to allow the associations to participate in the city contract as part of the RFP process. As you prepare the RFP, take it into consideration so that the associations would be able to would receive hopefully what we're estimating to be some of the cost savings. That is one thought. As far as Bonnie having to transport your probably limited amount of food waste on a weekly basis out to Green Mountain, I understand your concerns there. We did not look at any other options other than the haulers providing for the collection of the food waste on a weekly basis.
But that's what we told our that's what we told our all of our owners, that they would have to select one of 3 haulers, Earth Girl, some dudes, and no waste, or bring it themselves to Chittenden Solid Waste when it opened, or to run it out to Green Mountain, or to go to a friend's garden offsite.
Yes, when you have an unconsolidated system, you're going to see higher cost because the haulers will have to provide you pricing based on assuming that you have 25 homes in the association, but they're
We
only
have 40.
okay. I'm just estimating.
Oh, yeah, about 40.
Maybe only a third of those will participate in food waste collection. Therefore, the pricing is going to be more expensive. That's the reasoning for, I think you mentioned $22 a week or $22.
32 a month.
Yep.
Each person is on his or her own to contract privately.
Yeah, no, I understand that. And once again, it also feeds into there has to be an acceptable outlet or processing facility for the food waste. And that's why we're encouraging the district to consider expanding their current capabilities. If you don't have an outlet for it, then you can require the collection, but they won't have any place to take it except further away, perhaps, which increases your cost again. We can give that some thought and give the city and the district some suggestions to it, but at this moment, that's kind of my comment on it.
Okay, well, we pay our taxes, and I do appreciate all of your work and for this meeting, public meeting.
Bonnie, I have one more little bit of information. South Burlington drop-off center will be opening up Saturday, and they do accept food scraps there.
Okay.
It's a lot closer. It's not, an optimal solution, but it is a lot closer than driving out to Green Mountain Compost in Williston.
Great. We'll let our owners know. And that's a Saturday drop-off, correct?
Yes, they're opening this Saturday.
Okay. Thank you.
And they
You
are
should be
open
able to find that information on their website as well.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us, Bonnie.
You're welcome. I'll lower my hand.
We're going to move on to someone signed up under the name Grant. So Grant, it is now your turn, and I'll be allowing your microphone to be turned on.
And can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Grant.
All right. So I just wanted to say that Burlington can do very well with publicly owned and managed utilities, as we have done specifically with the water division, bringing fresh water to people and also accepting, the sewage back. Burlington Electric Department, Burlington Telecom before we got kind of let it go. Very reliable. Everybody's always got great customer service. Our schools and parks, Consolidated Recycling, and the Fletcher Free Library, and hopefully Memorial Auditorium again someday. We all vote for and I think push for kind of an expensive lifestyle in the city. A lot of people expect a lot from the government, and when things go well, they go really well. So I just wanted to say, please consolidate all the waste collection. The city already takes care of sewage, leaves, and recycling. Adding trash and compost to that list would be great. And if we're composting first and then recycling and then throwing in things in the trash, we shouldn't need weekly pickups. I don't think, for everybody. If we have three bins, probably every 2 weeks is probably easily picked up on the same day. I want to just remind everybody that, you know, we need to meet the standard, right, in 6 days, I think. And we've had 5 years since it was voted into to happen. So I was kind of hoping we'd have it already figured out. And then I just really wanted to just ask specifically if the composting pickup portion of all y'all's thought process is actually collecting things like chicken bones, greasy paper towels, compostable cups, and stuff like that in the food waste collection, because otherwise grease has to get washed down the drain, and that goes to the water system. So it's all nutrients that I would hope gets brought to our local composting facility and kind of closing our loop as a our societal consumption loop. If we can keep organics in our community, that'd be great. But I just didn't know if it was including those types of industrial composting. And that is all I think I need to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Grant. We did include those items in the estimation of the food waste collection. And yeah, I think I concur in terms of, we concur, and it's one of the recommendations in terms of the billing. So I think that was it.
And thank you, Grant, for your comments about your earlier comments about municipally owned entities. We'll certainly take note of that. So we appreciate that, and we'll be able to share more, as the discussion evolves over the next month. Grant, did you have a follow-up? We're allowing everybody one follow-up when they're on.
I would just say mainly, I think it'd be fantastic if we could collect all of the recycling, trash, and compost from all the properties in Burlington, kind of on a singular route with a singular publicly owned utility, instead of trying to include any private businesses so far. I think it seems like, anyway, sorry. No, I just wanted to keep it public. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. One of our partners at the Chittenden Solid Waste District did remind me that it'd be awesome for us to share, since that question's come up, their website, so you can find drop-off centers that are currently open. Obviously, they've been working through the COVID-19 situation as well, so we're mindful of that. Centers are opening, so they've pointed out that we should share www.cswd.net/DOC. And you'll be able to find that on our website as well, but very easy to just Google Chittenden Solid Waste District. Tons of good resources on that website. So thank you to our partners there. We're going to move on. Chris Horinsky, I'm going to be allowing you to talk. I see your hand is raised, so in about a moment, you should be able to join us.
Evening, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Chris Rinsky, and I'm currently an employee with City of Burlington. I just want to comment on being in favor for this consolidation study, because as someone who has to fill in for our recycling department every once in a while, it does take a toll on us. And if we were to go forward and consolidate, it would benefit our street department greatly by absorbing those recyclers, which means we could get more work done for the city of Burlington, and we wouldn't have to cover for those guys when they call in sick, take vacation, get hurt, and we can continue our jobs. That's all I had. I just wanted to put in my 2 cents as a city employee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, we are about to go to our last current member of the public who has their hand raised. Again, if anybody's joined us late, you can raise your hand on Zoom. There's a little feature at the bottom of your screen, or you can hit *9 if you happen to be called in, and we will call out your phone number when available. But we'll be allowing Lissa Faber to talk right now. In a moment, you should have access to your microphone.
Now can you hear me? Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Hey, I just want to, thanks for doing this. Very interesting. I just wanted to make a comment about, I want to make sure the way we structure this, we're thinking about not incentivizing more trash being used. And I know Alyssa over here, I'm Jacob, by the way, has
Lucky
seen,
you guys are having a watch party.
has seen different municipalities have different size buckets for recycling trash compost. With trash emphasized as the smallest. And I want to make sure we kind of have those thoughts in minds. And also, I know you guys were talking about having a certain percentage of people have to be a part of it. Just want to be careful about not trying to push trash, but push recycling and composting. What was the other thing I wanted to talk about? Oh, the other thing, it was a question actually, clarification question of, is the plan to make a couple of districts within each city so that smaller haulers have an opportunity to bid on a chunk that they can do? Because one of my concerns is if we do one whole city, we're going to end up with only one or two companies that can really bid effectively.
Mhm.
So there you go.
Thank you. Great. Thanks, Jacob and Alyssa. And Sam, can you, I think in terms of your comment on not incentivizing more trash, we definitely hear that, and is one of the reasons why we modeled all of the every other week scenarios, and even including every other week trash, which I, previously worked in the city of Portland, Oregon, when they started rolling out their program and did go to every other week trash. So I'm very familiar with that. And I know that's, it's something that's been on the table in this study. So thank you for that. And then Sam, can you chime in on the comment about the districts and the number and what we're thinking related to that point?
I'm sure. I actually appreciate the question from Jacob and Alyssa there and understand where you're going for. We actually took a look at that. And with the city of Burlington, you could potentially divide it into potentially 3 different districts just by numbers, not looking at the different street layout. This would probably give you enough critical mass to achieve some of the savings that we project. You will probably achieve a greater amount of savings if you have 1 or 2 haulers servicing the entire city. But you could consider breaking it into 2, maybe 3 at the most, and hopefully see some cost-effective benefits from that. You do have to take that into account. If you break it into too many small ones, then you kind of end up generating additional truck traffic, and you end up losing some of your efficiency in collection. So those are my initial thoughts on Jacob and Alyssa's comments.
Thank you.
We can allow one follow-up. Jacob, if you're still with us, I see you've muted your line, but you're welcome to ask that. And
yeah, actually, I've got another person, Reggie. He has a question. Why? Any thoughts? Why not include Winooski on this? Did you get that?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Lee Perry, my colleague, may jump in with more context. I believe that as the earlier initiative unfolded, which was a county-wide initiative that the district, CSWD, Chittenden Solid Waste District, was exploring, that was county-wide. That initiative did not continue to progress. Within, over the last few years, South Burlington kind of, joined efforts, and that's, these our 2 municipalities kind of worked through this. Our council passed that resolution to explore this with South Burlington. I don't have offhand the additional context about Winooski. I do see one of our colleagues from the Chittenden Solid Waste District is raising her hand, and we've indicated to each other that she'll weigh in when it's a relevant question. So I'm going to allow her to talk right now, and she may be able to give a little bit more historical context. And you're ready to go, Nancy, when you're ready.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I wanted to say that we did actually contact Winooski at the beginning before we went out to bid to see if they were interested in participating, all three cities. And at that time, they were not ready, but they're very interested in what happens going forward with Burlington and South Burlington.
Reggie, I hope that answers your question. We're allowing follow-ups for the same person that spoke, so feel free to jump in. If there are more people from your group that want to talk, feel free to raise your hand again. We do have somebody else in queue that's been waiting. So barring a follow-up from Reggie directly, we'll move on to, it says M. Casella. Is that Matt Casella? I'll be allowing you to talk in a moment. And for the watch party, you folks are more than welcome to raise your hand again.
Yeah, it's Michael Casella.
Michael, sorry.
Obviously, a hauler in the community. Obviously, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of thought. Love the concept and different ideas that you've brought to the table. I think one of the big things for me, just trying to understand, is all the intricacies of that routing and how we do it, and knowing that the recycling is a big thing, the organics and how we reduce those carbon emissions, and types of vehicles that would be used for that system would be one thing. And then also, understanding what the current system is and recycling rates for the city of Burlington, because they're doing it municipality, and how that rates to other communities throughout the country. I don't know if you guys have that data, because we obviously don't provide the recycling service. So understanding that, and then seeing if the cities would actually be willing to, I know compost is a really large topic right now, but even putting out a small test RFP to see how that goes from the standpoint of collecting organics and materials management that way with a single truck throughout all those different towns and residents. I know that the cost piece for me, and I just looked up Ledgewood, they are a customer of ours, and we do charge them around $550 per month for all 50 of those residents. So that works to about $11 per household for trash and recycling. And then there's the waste tax on top of it for the city of Burlington, which they collect that money. But I was just interested to see if the council would be interested in considering actually doing an organics consolidated collection. And then also what the recycling participation rates are and how it stacks up to other communities.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mike. And in terms of, I'm looking into the tons collected, Sam, and I don't know if you can give me a thumbs up if you have those numbers handy. I think the organics only RFP is is definitely an interesting idea, something that could be considered along with some of the other items that have been brought up here tonight. But we do have, because when we came on site and collected the data last year, we had a trip report with the tons, and I think that's also in the feasibility study, but we can follow up with you on that. I mean, you do have in general a very strong ethic around this, a lot of people caring, trying to reduce waste. I mean, this is not, many communities would not have as much interest or support around even considering every other week. Just to give you a context, we have a number of clients that still have twice a week garbage, trash. So you're obviously pushing forward and are ahead in that way. And in terms of the tons, I'm pretty sure that it's in the report or it's in the trip report. We can follow up with the specifics.
Mike, I think it's around 3,000 tons, right around there annually, that the city disposes at the MRF. It's about 500 stops per truck per day, 5 days a week.
And how does that compare? I guess my question for Jennifer and maybe Sam, how does that compare to other recycling participation rates for a city of 55,000 people.
Yeah, it is, we have, and I'm just pulling up the actual, I'm pulling that up because we did run the per household figures on that. It is a significantly good number, but there's room for improvement. I'm just trying to get to you, see if I can get you the actual number now. Yeah, I think that the tons are consistent with other communities that have the advanced program, like you've had your program, you know, since late 80s, early 90s, and have had an increased participation during that time, and you know have a number of people who also, a higher percentage than we expected actually, that are doing self-haul. We projected in the numbers the 15% number, but the actual results from the study were more in the 18 to 19% range. So, okay. Yeah, so I found it. So it's for the city of Burlington, the program resulted in diversion of 440 pounds per household on an annual basis. And again, we can follow up in terms of how that compared with the trash and the waste, but it's a solid program. Obviously not getting to where you desire to be in terms of overall diversion, and not having the food waste is a significant portion of that, but 440 per household. And Sam, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say.
No, just based on my general observations and from other communities that I've been involved in servicing, looked like participation rates were high. And I believe the size of the containers actually offered by the city of Burlington may be restricting the amount of recyclables. But that's just an observation. I did not try to quantify it anywhere past what Jennifer just brought forth, but that was my observation. Seemed high. Might have an ability to increase it by offering larger containers. We actually saw some really, I'd have to say, constructive packaging in the containers that were set out at Curbside. Those are my only comments, Mike, on that.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll try to quantify it perhaps a little better for you.
We do offer 3 sizes of containers, 95 gallon, 65 and 35 gallon for recycling, and we have for quite a while. We've been getting away from the blue bin just because, as you stated in the study, it's a lot cleaner.
Mm-hmm.
Like Sam pointed out, there was some pretty creative packing in those little bins. So yeah, we've been dispersing quite a few carts over the past couple of weeks.
That was just my observation, I think, based on 2 days. So it's really just an observation, not anything we could actually quantify at this point in time.
Yeah, we're definitely we're moving in a great better direction with the increased toters that Lee's team manages, and we have last we checked inventory of plenty in stock. So for folks on this call, we definitely encourage you to sign up. They're heavily discounted for the community, and we love giving them out. So it's on our website. You can apply, and right now, real quick, we're gonna. Oh, Michael, were you adding something? We have another commenter after you.
No, I'm all set.
Thank you. So we have, looks like one more hand raised from someone else that already spoke. So we're going to give that person an opportunity to speak. We're kind of getting to the end of our meeting. If there's anybody that hasn't spoken, we definitely want to hear from you. There's probably still an opportunity to raise your hand or hit *9 if you've called in. So we're going to go to that last commenter that signed up, repeat commenter, which is fine. But just in case anybody who hasn't commented wants to jump in, we want to hear from you too. And then we'll close out the meeting and offer some links and opportunities to understand what comes next. So Grant, it looks like you are now back up.
Hey, so you call and all hear me again.
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. I was just going to ask if you guys had heard and studied other communities of our size that have done this kind of exact changeover to the composting and the recycling and the trash, and really if it worked, you know, like kind of how they did it. Did they do a public-private partnership, or did they all do it? Did they do it all public, or, you know, did it work anywhere? That's my question.
We can, Kate and Sam, if you have any example you want to bring up, I can say from the experience that I had in the city of Portland, Oregon, where they did have they had an open market system with dozens of small haulers servicing, and have had a franchise system since the 90s, and it has territories with rate setting annually and service provision requirements. And as you know, maybe about Oregon's program is increasingly heading to diversion, as focus on diversion. And as I said, now has evolved to this point of having every other week trash, weekly compost, and weekly recycling. And I think in that story, you know, whereas they started with dozens of districts, have, as Sam said, you don't necessarily get the all the cost savings and truck reduction there. So they've now it's through attrition and companies, you know, consolidating in their own way in terms of the franchises. They've now down to about a dozen districts, and in that case, I think has really high service provision and performance, and it's a good example of an evolution of a community that was already, you know, more environmentally minded, but trying to think about how they could have some of these additional benefits. So it's not a one size fits all. Every community, like I said, some places are, you know, not at the point that you are already with your recycling program. So thinking about taking and you know, an established program and moving into the next level is, I'm not going to say unique. There are communities also, you know, looking at, you know, they currently have a contract position looking at municipal collection. So there are a lot of different scenarios out there. I don't know if Sam or Kate, you want to bring up anyone in particular.
I'll just add briefly that they do use franchises a lot when there needs to be a high level of service. For example, as in California, there are a lot of the franchises that are not, they have pay as you throw, and they want to allow people to choose the containers, which has been discussed tonight. And they have to have food waste diversion because of their state goals. And so they use franchises a lot, because then many of these cities also want curbside collection of sharps from people and jugs of oil. They want to divert as much of this material to proper and specialized management as possible. It's an operational goal. And so they use franchises for that a lot, because it's so complex that having this kind of general management helps ensure that everyone in the system is getting the service that they are supposed to have, and that has been contracted for them, and that they're paying for. So I know California isn't everybody's favorite example, but that is something where there was this organizational priority from the people, and it's an effective way to accomplish it and maintain some competition, kind of balancing that out a little bit. Probably Sam can draw some more specific examples also.
Very cool.
I'm going to just for see if the technology works, actually, to share one example, if I can, unless Sam, you want to say something. If you guys can see my screen, this is an example from the Portland system. This is their annual rate review that I mentioned, Grant. They do yearly to set the rates, but it has some great stats in it. And if you can see the screen, are you on the phone, or can you see this screen? Grant, I'm not sure, but in any case, the chart that's shown here shows the evolution of the program, and you can really see the switch in the gray bar being garbage, the recycling, and the organics. You can see the increased, you know, provision of service moving to also moving from the curbside bins to roll carts in the late 2000s. And then also seeing curbside organics in around 2012. So it's an interesting example of change in program and gets back to Jacob's comment about not incentivizing more trash.
With that, I believe we're kind of at the end of our meeting here, and it doesn't appear that there are any more public commenters. I'm going to turn this over in a moment to Lee Perry, our Assistant Director at DPW. Director Spencer had to step away for a family matter. We just want to let you know, I'm going to put up a screen here. For those joining us late or for those looking for more information, hope you can visit our website, burlingtonvt.gov/DPW/maintenance/consolidated. I don't think we do great with the URLs, but I think all the information is up there for you. If you have questions about tonight, you can email that email address there. We're going to try to get some of these questions that were asked today, some of the commonly asked questions, up on our website so you can refer to it there. And as Lee may indicate, we are going to be doing another meeting in July, probably later in July, addressing some of what we've heard tonight and seeing where this conversation has gone. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to either Jennifer and her team, and then Lee to kind of close us out. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I think we're just so appreciate everybody being here. And, we thought we would be up there in person, but this seems to be, I like the accessibility and that allows people to both phone in and not have to travel. So for that fact, it's a benefit. But thanks again to everybody and for your attention and staying on.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate that sentiment and, just to follow up with what Rob said, we will be having another public meeting in July. We'll be getting a revised version of the study, which we'll bring to City Council, hopefully late summer, early fall. And and then we'll go from there. And, we're going to address all the questions. And as Rob pointed out, you continue to submit questions and comments, and we'll get them to Jennifer and her team. And we'll go from there. And I appreciate everybody tuning in, taking time out of your night to listen to this presentation. It's a very important subject.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Great to be with you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night now.
Okay. Bye-bye.